Welcome to our Saturday conversation, simulcast, and the opportunity to rehash a memorable, if not difficult for Purdue fans, loss to Minnesota last night. It is, as of this recording, Saturday afternoon, and I want to thank our sponsor, and that, of course, is the Purdue Union Club Hotel. They'll have a watch parties for the Rutgers game and also Nebraska upcoming, as the Boilermakers will be at home next Saturday at 4 p.m. for the start against Rutgers, and then Nebraska on December the 5th. That start time will probably be announced on Monday or Tuesday. Brian, I'll start with you. Just and Tom's still getting his legs back after returning back from Minnesota. But obviously everybody's talking about the call, and a difficult one at that went against Purdue. And certainly several angles that you look at, it looks very egregious. But if you take other looks at it, maybe not as much. But tell me what you think.
Yeah, I want to preface this by saying I don't think it was a good call. I think it was the wrong call at the wrong time. I think it was a call where if that's offensive pass interference, then there are a dozen plus offensive pass interferences that should be called every single game. But with the benefit of hindsight and with the benefit of multiple camera angles, slowed down and digested like the Zapruder film last night, there is an angle from overhead that shows Payne Durham clearly putting his arm out on the defender. What the angles do not show, and I should add that the mainstream angles that are going around nationally do a remarkable job blind spotting the actual infraction, where one stops and the other starts. Right between the two angles is where it occurs. So when you just see what's going around mainstream, it doesn't look like anything happened at all. And that's what I first saw when I watched it. I thought he just ran past and brushed at his hand ever so gently, and that's what they called. There was clearly a moment or two where he puts his arm out. That doesn't necessarily get broadcast all over the place. But be that as it may, the camera angles taken in their totality do not show any discernible impact on the defender. And offensive pass interference, there is supposed to be obvious and impactful contact made. I don't think there was. There certainly wasn't enough to merit the call, in my opinion. I understand a penalty is a penalty no matter what the situation is, but for a game to be decided on that seems extremely questionable. Some other people have shown the replay of one of the big passes Minnesota hit, where there was contact as well on, I believe it was Giovante Howard, and it did create separation. And it happened right in front of, I believe, the same referee, and it wasn't called. I know football's football and this stuff happens, but I see now where the referee at least saw something that would compel him to consider making the call. I still don't think he should have made the call. Just a really, really unfortunate, turn of events for Purdue, much like the Kenneth Major interception at Nevada last year, where Purdue seemed to make the play they needed to make to win the game. But, on the other side of this, and we'll spend the rest of the show talking about all that went into putting Purdue in that position as well. Purdue had so many opportunities offensively. Purdue was not very good defensively, and that's what put them in that position in the first place. But the reality of it is that was an extremely questionable call, but there was at least a little bit of basis for it, which a lot of people might not have even noticed last night. I didn't notice it right away, but it was there if you really, really look for it.
Yeah, Tom. Obviously, a night so many storylines to last night, and obviously the call and the ending, the way it ended, and Jeff Brom's reaction to it. But you also had Rondale Moore return with really a spectacular return in a lot of ways. That 33-yard run right from the get-go got your attention in a hurry. And also his comments post-game. What did you make of those? Just in fact that he kind of had I don't know if he called a mea culpa, but he made an apology of sorts. I thought that was well stated, but his performance got everybody in the nation's attention last night just because of the way he just does things.
Yeah, sometimes forget really how special he is, right?
Unbelievable.
So he's so good, guys. My mom even texted me last night. He's not a big football fan. So, yeah, boy, Alan, it didn't take him long from the jump, right? That second touch he had, 33 yards, the stutter step, that one run to the end zone where he sprints to the cone. I mean, he's just been touched by God to be a special athlete, a great football player. And, again, his impact is oh so noticeable and oh so welcome to this offense, guys. And this offense, it emptied its bucket on Friday night, I think. How about Jack Plummer, too, guys? First start of the year.
Great.
Wonder how he could have lost any quarterback competition with the way he played at TCF Bank Stadium. The first half, I think he only had a couple incompleted passes. 35 of 42, 367 yards, 3 touchdowns. I'm not going to hold that interception against him. That was in desperation time. But again, he's probably going to be the quarterback maybe for the long term, guys. Jeff Brom was asked after the game how long Aiden was going to be out, and he was coy with it. But I got to think maybe it's going to be, who knows, maybe a game or two or longer. So again, if that is the case, we know Plummer can more than handle this offense. Then you got more. We haven't even talked about David Bell. We're finally seeing that dynamic duo together, guys. Again, long story short, this offense was in position to deliver a victory on Friday night. It didn't happen for a lot of different reasons, but again, plenty of reasons for optimism moving forward here if this offense continues to click like it did up there in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I made a mistake, and my son pointed it out as I was sitting there watching the game. I tweeted something about how it would have been an all-time performance in terms of percentage had the game ended with he was well over 91% completions, with better Kyle Orton. So I was personally responsible, apparently. But no, I thought he was terrific. Thought he was in control. I thought one of the best plays, Brian, early on was that ball. It got Purdue going because Purdue got out of the box slow. He makes the fake and gets the first down on the run.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not going to. I like everything about Aiden O'Connell's effort and his ability to throw the football. So I'm not slamming him, but it's hard, Brian, not to look at that. Look at his a little bit of athleticism and just the way he comports himself back there that makes him very attractive at quarterback.
Yeah, he is one offensive pass interference call away from being, Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week probably, and Purdue being 3-1. I mean, he was fantastic. Did everything you needed him to do, and there is a conversation to be had here where I kind of wonder, I think we all respect Aiden O'Connell. We all understand what he brings to the table. He's been a good soldier for Purdue. He won them games last year. He's been a productive player. He's good enough to win with, but you do wonder, what happened in preseason practice that really gave Aiden O'Connell that advantage over everybody else. Because if that Jack Plummer was the Jack Plummer practicing, during the preseason, as I've talked about for months, I think we all have, with Jack Plummer, you have a little bit more upside because of that third down, because of that play you just mentioned, where he can go take 5 yards when there's 5 yards to be had and you need 5 yards. He can extend plays. He can do a little bit more. He can open up your playbook ever so slightly more. There was a third down too where, they completed it to Rondell Moore on a 3rd and 2, where you roll the pocket out ever so slightly. And the fact that he's a running threat even, opens those plays up a little bit more. They ran a QB draw at one point, didn't work. I thought it would. I thought they were holding on to that for the perfect moment. It didn't work, but down the line, that sort of play will work. It just, he was phenomenal, to be honest with you. And you do kind of wonder what held him back in the preseason, because that Jack Plummer is the Jack Plummer we saw against Maryland last year. He looks healthy, so it must not be the ankle from last year. There's no reason to think it's the ankle from last year, but he was really, really good. And that Jack Plummer we saw last night almost single-handedly took Purdue to a win where it did not play on defense and special teams good enough to win. And he damn near obviously had a lot of help from some really phenomenal weapons around him, but he was really, really good. And, I would be surprised if this is anything close to what his normal will be the rest of the season if he's not Purdue's quarterback the rest of the way. I know that's kind of a hot one-game take, but he was really, really good last night.
David Bell also a phenomenal play just on that interception that wasn't an interception that he took back. That could have been a completion, but they called it, I think, correctly that he was out. That the Minnesota defender was out of bounds. Again, you almost forget about him, but you don't, because he was terrific as well. He obviously had the long touchdown reception, had 100 yards receiving, but you just hope, I guess, from a pure watchability standpoint, you hope that you can get at least 4 more games of watching Rondell Moore and David Bell play together, because it was fun football to watch. I know it didn't end well for Purdue fans, but it was entertaining, especially the second half. Really, really interesting football.
Yeah, third quarter, that offense really came alive for Purdue, guys. That's when they had their 14 points and really got rolling. Jack Plummer, I think that quarter, guys, was 9 of 9 passing.
Yeah.
And Allen, yeah, David Bell, Rondale Moore, they combined for 23 catches and just a dynamic duo, guys. That receiving rotation really tightened up with Moore back in the lineup, guys. Only 3 receivers were targeted all night, with Milton Wright being the third. Of course, Horvath and Payne Durham caught passes as well. But again, a lot of weapons. But again, while we like to heap praise on the offense, and it more than deserves it, we all understand this defense has some screws to tighten up. I don't think it's an overstatement to say this was probably its least effective performance of the year. We saw a lot of breakdowns in coverage downfield. Seemed like time and again, especially on third downs, Minnesota was converting with some long passes to Chris Altman-Bell or Rashad Bateman, keeping the ball away from Purdue. And, guys, the first, 3 quarters, Brian asked Jeff Brom this after the game, why could you not slow down this Minnesota offense? And they couldn't get off the field. And Jeff Brom talked about that. They kept the ball away from Purdue for long stretches in that first half because the Purdue defense could not get off the field. Minnesota did what I was fearful it was going to be able to do, and that was run the football. Mo Ibrahim showed why he's so special. And again, that offense was very effective for the Gophers, a lot of fight. But I will say this, when push comes to shove, I guess that defense made the big stop late, right, with Marvin Grant. And then they gave the offense a chance to win it. But again, there's obviously room to improve for this defense still. And I didn't even talk about the personnel losses defensively, right, guys? What do you think? No Anthony Watts at defensive tackle. You have an injured George Karlaftis out there trying to play. And also, guys, DeMarcus Mitchell, probably the best defensive player, missed most of this game. I asked Coach Brom afterwards what happened. He didn't get into specifics. Mitchell got hurt somehow, some way, guys. But you take talent like that away from your defense, it's really going to impact you.
I think one thing that's interesting is looking at the numbers and nothing else. You're right. I mean, they were 7 of their first 9 on third down, and then Purdue had 2 stops down the stretch in terms of third down conversion. So Minnesota finishes 7 for 11. But even Ibrahim had a big day, but he only had 104 yards. I mean, it kept him to 4.1 yards. I know the eyeball test is for the first 3 quarters, Purdue couldn't stop them, and that is true. I mean, I think it needs to get better. But there were some good things, and you're right about those 3 defenders. Karlaftis, to me, God love him for his effort, but he was ineffective. I mean, and they had 0 sacks. And I know they didn't have any sacks on him last year either. Tanner Morgan's a hard guy to sack. But there's some reasons for that, and I thought late in this fourth quarter there was a good sign. If you can build from this, that you might have some better things moving forward. Brian, your take on that?
On the defense?
Yeah,
I thought for 3.5 quarters they were awful, to be honest with you, and it was a huge step backwards. Now, obviously, DeMarcus Mitchell is a huge piece of this puzzle. Anthony Watts is important. George Karlaftis is obviously an enormous piece of this puzzle, but regardless, they had no answers for an offense that wasn't really reinventing the wheel here. And just a really, really disappointing performance for Purdue, and a huge step backwards for that defense. Give them a little bit of credit, I guess, for coming up with the stops at the end. They needed them, and pulling PJ Fleck out of the frying pan, because what he did going for that 4th down was insane, was a dereliction of his duties as a coach, putting his team in that position. And he got away with it because Purdue couldn't, score in the red zone. One of the 3 times they couldn't. But the defense, by and large, I think what we saw was that, Purdue's defense has been, good this season when it's been forcing turnovers, when it's forcing opponents to make mistakes, or when opponents just happen to be making mistakes. And, that was the case with Iowa. That was the case with Illinois. It dried up against Northwestern. It dried up against Minnesota. And, Purdue wasn't awful against Northwestern. They were good enough to win, but they weren't good enough to win at Minnesota. And that was profoundly disappointing. I think Purdue, struggled to find the right balance on third down between no pressure and too much pressure. And you have to give Minnesota credit for making some tough throws on 3rd and 4th and 1, beating Purdue in all-out pressure. But there had to be a middle ground there where you could have at least made Tanner Morgan a little bit more uncomfortable more often. I thought early on maybe a little bit more run blitzing might have, at least thrown them out of their rhythm. But I think just by and large, this was a profoundly disappointing performance from Purdue's defense, and I say that understanding the circumstances of them not having the guys up front that they didn't have.
Two guys. One quick note here: the quarterbacks Purdue has faced, right? First two games, Spencer Petras, first career start ever. Illinois, you have a 4-string quarterback. Then you're playing Peyton Ramsey and Tanner Morgan. Huge jump up there in ability level and experience level. And I think that was shown out in Purdue's struggles to get off the field and be quite as effective defensively.
Yeah, good point. And only one.
It is important to give Minnesota some credit because Tanner Morgan made all the throws he needed to make. He's a Purdue killer if there ever was one. I mean, that guy, Purdue will be so happy the day he graduates.
15 to 22.
But still, you have to do a better job against the run. This is a no gap defense where it seemed like every first down there was a hole you could have pushed a wheelbarrow through in the front of Purdue's defensive front, and that obviously was problematic. Again, Purdue was down some important pieces up front, but Purdue just didn't have any answers.
Yeah, and again, it's an interesting game. When you look at some of those numbers, it is something that it'll be a game no matter bad call aside. Purdue would wish and would like to have in the victory column. All right, last question, Tom, on obviously Rutgers and Nebraska and even Indiana, as of this recording, is getting it handed to them to some extent, though they've been relatively competitive in certain ways. But you do have games you can win from this point forward. So that point, again, it's important. You talked about the need of this program to it's 2-2 now. It's done some good things this year, some things in the right direction, but you'd like to get yourself to an over 500 record when you're done with the season, whenever that is.
Yeah, I think that should be the benchmark for year 4 of the Jeff Brom era. Every team's got issues they deal with every season. They're young. They've got injuries. They've got COVID issues, whatever. People don't really want to hear your problems. They just want to see results. Yeah. And you have to figure it out. And this schedule coming up, as you said, Alan, there's plenty of opportunity for Purdue to enjoy success, beginning with Rutgers visit, and then like you talked about, then Nebraska at home, and then you go down to Bloomington. Guys, we've seen Purdue teams go down there and beat much better IU teams over the years. And why Indiana's certainly good, fellas. They're not the 1975 Pittsburgh Steelers, and they can be had. So my point is, Purdue's awfully close to being 4-0, and Jeff Brom's got to keep these guys dialed in because there's talent there. This is a good team, and like I said, these opponents coming up. It's not a murderer's row, and this is a program that I think needs to find some way to finish over 500 if it can. And again, there's certainly plenty of possibility for that.
All right, Brian, one piece of news and basketball. Obviously, it's just hard to imagine.
I just want to say one other thing about football real quick. Purdue's just got to get to the point where everything's, working at once. Last week, the defense was good enough to win with. The offense was bad. Mm-hmm. This week the offense was great, the defense was bad, and the special teams with an all Big Ten kicker or all Big Ten caliber kicker and a reliable snapper, that operation breaks down on you twice, and that's just kind of inconsistency of it all. And if Purdue can get to the point where maybe one unit's not playing great, but all of them are playing at least solid, that's where Purdue has to get from a consistency perspective to make something, of this season. So I'll let you ask your question.
Well, I just wanted to ask, because obviously Monday, a big commitment coming, or a big decision coming. Fletcher Lawyer looking at making a decision. And you have basketball next week. Purdue will open up Wednesday in theory. Not in theory, it's supposed to be happening, and it's still crazy as heck. But, it gets a little bit lost in the shuffle with all this football, and understood. But some news coming on Monday that'll be of interest, and then obviously the start of the season for Purdue's men's basketball team.
Yeah, Purdue, Fletcher Lawyer is a guard who's now from Fort Wayne. He was from Clarkston, Michigan. He moved into Fort Wayne this year. His dad got a job, I believe. And he's a really, really good player. Really, really good. He's one of the guys I braved the COVID jungle to go see a bunch of times this summer. And was just floored by how skilled he is, by how well refined he is as an offensive player, and just how good a Purdue fit he would be. And Purdue noticed that right away, and more significantly, Fletcher Lawyer noticed that right away. And that speaks to, I think, the substance that exists in this player. And I just think he's very comparable to Dakota Mathias. He's got a little bit more game to him, probably. Might not be quite the passer, but he's pretty good. He's an elite shooter. He's a good all-around scorer, a really smart player, just straight out of central casting for Purdue basketball. And things look very favorable for Purdue there Monday to add him as a really, really nice first get for this 2022 class.
Yeah, so we'll be watching for that on the site as well, and obviously have football coverage as we head into Thanksgiving week. All right, guys, thanks for your analysis, and always interesting, and never a dull moment. This is a game that Purdue fans will be talking about for a long time, and now all you're left with, if you're Jeff Brom and company, is what you do moving forward, because what's done is done. All right, well, I want to thank our sponsor, that's the Purdue Union Club Hotel, for all of its support of our Saturday simulcast. And we will look forward to, we'll be coming to you with this type of format after the Rutgers game, which will be next Saturday night. The game's time 4 p.m. I believe the game is on BTN. I don't know if I'm right on that, but 4 o'clock start nonetheless. So have a great Thanksgiving all. Everybody be safe. Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll look forward to talking to you next week.